Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I have swatches for you from the brand Gracefull Nail Polish. I do have their Enchanted Fables Collection, which is inspired by fairy tales, as well as one Halloween shade to share with you. All of these will go on sale on September 28th. In the description box below, I will link the Gracefull site, I will link their Instagram page, and I will link my Instagram page where you can see more swatches of everything from today's video. So including the Halloween shade, we have 9 polishes to look at today, and let's go ahead and get started. So first we have Pick Your Poison, and this is described as an aurora shimmer that allows the polish to be hot pink in some lights and bright red in other lights, and this was inspired by Snow White. So here's our first coat of Pick Your Poison. This is pretty opaque here on this first coat. It's just a little bit patchy and it can get a little bit deeper, so I am going to go in for a second coat. The formula on this is really good. It's a little bit on the thinner side, so you do want to work in thinner coats to avoid any kind of running and pulling, but it's not so thin that it's difficult to work with by any means. So here's our second coat, and this does come completely opaque in 2 coats for me. It dries decently glossy but slightly textured, so you will want a glossy top coat either way. Nothing in here is going to stick to your nails when removing those, so you should just be able to use non-acetone remover. So there's 2 coats. Up next we have Belle of the Ball, and this is described as a yellow to very light yellow thermal. Warm is very light yellow and cold is this brighter yellow. This has a gold and red hollow micro glitter throughout, and this is inspired by Beauty and the Beast. Here's our first coat of Belle of the Ball. This covers really well here on this first coat. I am going to go in for a second coat for a couple light spots. The formula on this is really good, not too thick or too thin. It's very easy to use and stays right where you put it. I did have trouble with these thermals though in this whole video, keeping it in a certain state. So this one kept wanting to stay in the warm state, so my swatches of these are very wet. But it just means that the thermal properties of this are very reactant. You get a ton of glitter out without having to do any kind of swirling. This does dry textured, so you will want a nice glossy top coat, and it is a little bit difficult to take off. So there is 2 coats, and here is our cold state, our warm state, and a side-by-side. Up next we have Kiss a Prince, and this is described as a pea green linear hollow with rose gold flakies and the crystal chameleon flakies in pink, green, and gold, and this is inspired by The Princess and the Frog. Here's our first coat of Kiss a Prince. This goes on pretty opaque here on this first coat also. It's just a little bit sheer, so I am going to add a second coat. The formula on this is pretty good as well. It's again on the thinner side like the first polish was, but it's not so thin that it's difficult to work with. You just have to work in a little bit thinner of coats. The flakies in here don't stand out like tremendously, but they do add like a special something that gives it kind of like a glowy look to it, which I really appreciate. Nothing in here dries textured, and nothing in here is difficult to remove either. So there is 2 coats. Up next we have Sirens Tale, and this is described as a turquoise metallic flake with sparks of blue metallic flakies, and this is inspired by The Little Mermaid. Here's our first coat of Sirens Tale. This one's a little bit sheer here on this first coat, so it is one that's going to have to be built up. This one is primarily made of those micro shredded metallic pieces, so that's why to get the most of this metallic look, you're going to want more of the metallic pieces as opposed to a base color. So this builds up nicely in 2 coats. I am going to go in for a third coat, but if you did a thicker first coat and a thicker second coat, you could probably wear this just fine on 2 coats. But I do work in thin coats, so I am going to go in for a third coat. And the formula on this is really good. There's no running or pulling or staining or anything like that either. So this is completely opaque in 3 coats for me. This one dries pretty glossy on its own. If you want it to last, you will want a nice glossy top coat to finish this off, and it doesn't affect the metallic-y look to it at all. So there's 3 coats. Up next we have If the Shoe Fits, and this is described as a light blue linear hollow with shimmer in blue and pink and chameleon iridescent flakies, and this is inspired by Cinderella. Here's our first coat of If the Shoe Fits. This one is a little bit sheer here on this first coat. It does build up really, really nicely though. I thought this would be another one that I would need 3 coats for, but it does become completely opaque in 2 coats. The formula on this is really good as well. There's no running or pulling or staining. It's just the same formula as Kiss of Prince was, the other hollow. It's a little bit on the thinner side, but it's very easy to control. So again, this is completely opaque in 2 coats here, and it's also going to be much more holographic when it dries than it is when it's wet, so just bear that in mind. You will want a glossy top coat for this. It does dry slightly textured, but nothing in here is hard to remove. So there is 2 coats. Next up we have Mr. Right, and this is described as a royal blue to sky blue thermal, and its sky blue is when it's warm. There's silver flakes throughout with aurora shimmer that gives a purpley shift, and this is inspired by Prince Charming. Here's our first coat of Mr. Right, and this one is very opaque here on this first coat. I can just make out my nail line a little bit, so I am going to go in for a second coat. So this one I had a hard time keeping in the warm state. So these are very reactant, and depending on, you know, how I am at that moment, I am either really cold or really hot, and there is no in between. So you're gonna have to trust the dipping side by side for the color comparisons. But this does dry to a matte finish. If you don't like that, you will want a nice glossy top coat to finish this off. And it dries slightly textured, but nothing that's obnoxious, and nothing in here is hard to remove. And I also didn't have any staining with this one, so there's 2 coats. And here is our warm state, our cold state, and then a side by side. Up next we have Hair-o-ine, and this is described as a purple orchid linear hollow base packed with lavender and pink shimmer, and this is inspired by Rapunzel. Here's our first coat of Hair-o-ine. And this one is very opaque here on this first coat. Depending on your application, if you work in a little bit thicker, more careful coats, this could easily be a 1 coater for you. I am going to go in for a second coat, and just like the other 2 hollows in this collection that have these flakes in them, the flakes don't stand out. They're not the main part of these polishes, but it adds just something extra and something special to the polishes, which I can really appreciate. So this one does dry down to a slightly textured finish. You will want a nice glossy top coat to finish this off, and it's not difficult to remove. So there is 2 coats. And lastly from the collection we have Sleeping Rose, and this is described as a rose pink thermal that's rose pink when it's this gold and a super light pink when it's warm. There are also gold flakes throughout, and this is inspired by Sleeping Beauty. Here's our first coat of Sleeping Rose, and this covers pretty well here on this first coat as well. This one wanted to, for me, stay in the warm state, so again you're going to have to trust the comparison with the water if you want to see the side-by-sides of what colors these are supposed to be in each state. But this also has a great formula, not too thick or too thin, very easy to work with, and this is completely opaque here in 2 coats for me. This one also dries down to a matte finish, so you will want a glossy top coat to finish it off if you don't like that look. The flakies in here stand out really, really nicely, and they do dry slightly textured, so you will want a glossy top coat, and nothing in here is hard to remove, so there's 2 coats. And here is our warm state, our cold state, and then a side by side. And then the Halloween polish I have to share with you is called Plum Scared, and this is described as a deep, deep purple jelly with ultra chrome chameleon flakes, hollow micro glitter, and packed full of aurora shimmer for extra pops of color. Here's our first coat of Plum Scared. This covers pretty well here on this first coat. It's almost a 1 coater for me. I am going to go in for a second coat as I'm working in thinner coats, but depending on how thick you do your coats, this could probably be another 1 coater for you. Again, a great formula, not too thick or too thin, very easy to work with. These flakies in here are going to dry pretty textured because there's a ton of them, so you will want a nice glossy top coat. The removal isn't per se difficult. You are going to want to do a little bit of extra scrubbing, but I don't think it's necessary for a peel off base coat or pure acetone for this one either. So there is 2 coats. 9 shades. I feel 3 favorites are justifiable. The first one being Mr. Right. I love the flakies in the thermal. I think it looks beautiful in both states. It had a perfect formula, very easy to use, very easy to wear. It's one of those shades that like aren't too obnoxious on your nails, but it's bright at the same time, so I really like that one. The next one being Belle of the Ball, another thermal. I love yellow polish, but the red glitter in here just stands out so beautifully, and it looks so nice again in both the cold and the warm states, which I feel like can be really hard to do in thermals, so I do appreciate them when I find them. And of course, Kiss a Prince, the green, a hollow. It's good. I mean, it's predictable. So these were the standouts in the collection for me. And that is it. Let me know in the comments below what you guys thought of these polishes. Let me know if you plan on picking any of them up, and let me know what your favorites were. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe if you'd like to see more from me, and I will talk to you again next time. Bye.